Welcome to Chapter 4, where we're going to begin looking at Greek prepositions. This is Mr. Preposition. Prep here is going to help you to learn about prepositions. Prepositions are used to help nouns to express their case function and their relation to other words in the sentence more precisely. And so Prep will be here with us throughout many parts of the course as we begin looking at how we use and how they function in this Greek language. Prepositions are used in English all the time. We use them to help us limit the action of the verb and to make the sentence more precise. So, for instance, we say things like, we go into the house. Or we might use a preposition to describe the fact that there is a monster under my bed. Sometimes we want people to know that there is a virus in my computer. Or sometimes we just think that everything is better somewhere over the rainbow. Each of the words in red on your screen represent a preposition in English that we use at times to make things more precise. There's a monster in my bedroom, or there's a monster. It works very well, but where exactly is the monster? Well, we use it under my bed. Or I'm going somewhere. Well, where are you going? I'm going into the house. There's a virus. Well, where? In my computer, which of course makes a big difference as to whether it is a virus that is human or technological. Just like in English, prepositions are used in Greek to help nouns precisely express their case function and their relation to verbs and the other words that are in the sentence. The term preposition, or where we get preposition, means that the preposition precedes the noun that it is associated with. And that's one thing you'll discover as we go through this lesson and throughout Greek. Prepositions always come before the noun that they're about to modify. Now on your screen there you see a picture of the globe, and then of course there are various arrows there, and each one of them is associated with a Greek word. There are a number of prepositions that we can use in Greek. You're going to learn some of them this week. You'll learn others later. Some of them are actually prepositions that actually show up in the English language as well. For instance, if you look at the middle of the globe, you see the Greek preposition en, which means in, and that's exactly where we get our preposition in English from. Dia, which means to go through, also in the center, is where we get the word diameter from in English. And above that, you have the Greek word sun, which means with. And of course, you're going to have the idea of synagoge, or synagogue, to gather with or to gather together. Off to the right, you can see pointing up, we have the ana, which means to go up. All right, like Anabaptist, okay. Off to the left, we have pro, as in before. So you can see there's a number of prepositions that you're going to have a chance to learn over the course of this term, and that each of them are going to function in various ways. When you translate a preposition, all right, the noun following the preposition is called the object of the preposition. And we're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about that, but what you need to keep in mind is that prepositions go with cases, and they only go with three cases. They either go with the genitive, the dative, or the accusative case. Please note that there is no nominative case in relation to a preposition. Only the genitive, the dative, and the accusative. In order to translate a preposition, you need to be aware of three things. The basic meaning of the preposition, which you will be learning as part of your vocabulary, and in your book for this week, there's a series of prepositions at the end of the chapter that you'll be asked to learn. The other thing is the case of the noun object. That is, what is the case of the noun that the preposition is modifying? Because that at times will tell you what the meaning of the preposition is and how to translate it. And then finally, one thing you're going to learn overall in this class is that whenever you're doing a translation, what is the context? How does that help you to understand best what's going on and how to translate it? So with that in mind, let's take a look at a variety of prepositions that you'll be learning this week. Some prepositions only ever appear with one case. So for instance, the preposition en on your screen there is only used with the dative, and it simply means in. Now, up to this point, when you've been doing the dative, we've asked you to include words like in, to, with, by, or for when you're translating the dative. The nice thing about the preposition in now is that it actually makes the translation more precise. You know that it means in the house, for instance, rather than by, with, or for. And again, that's how a preposition works. And so here is a sample sentence that we have here. Entes cardiaes simply means in the hearts. Notice that we have a feminine plural dative is your definite article, and feminine plural dative is your noun, and the preposition works with the dative there, and you just simply translate it as in the hearts. Another preposition that will only work with one case is the preposition ek, and it only works with the genitive case, and it has a basic meaning of out of or from. So with that, if that's the case, then in this little sample sentence below, we have ek to oiku, or out of or from the house. Again, this is a time when context will help you to better decide if somebody is actually coming out of the house or they're coming away from the house. One more preposition that only goes with one case and also goes with the genitive is the preposition apa, which means from. Okay, like the preposition ek, and you're going to notice this there again on your screen. Notice that ek can also mean from, and apo means from. There's going to be different reasons why they use it, and again, it's for making things more precise, and we'll cover this more as we go throughout the time of the course. But what you need to know now is the basic meaning of these prepositions and the cases that they work with. Now, our sample sentence here, apu tu aranu. Going with the genitive, we have tu. There is your masculine singular genitive. Hurano comes from huranas, masculine singular genitive. So apu tu uranu means from heaven. Now, technically, it really means from the heaven. But as you're going to see sometimes, and this is just a part of learning how to nuance your translation correctly, sometimes even though you have a definite article, you won't want to translate it. So I suggest you start off trying to translate it with the definite article first. You would say here, from the heaven, and then actually think, does that make sense, or does it sound better in English just to simply say from heaven, which of course is the case. Now, some prepositions are actually going to be able to accompany two different cases. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the preposition dia. Dia can go with the genitive. When it goes with the genitive, then dia simply means through. So in your sample we have dia tes Samarias, which I've translated as through Samaria. All right, dia with a genitive means through. Now again, notice here we could translate the definite article that's there through the Samaria, but again that's overly wooden and is not necessary. So dia with a genitive means Samaria. But when you put dia with an accusative case, it means on account of or because. And in this sentence we have now dia again, but dia tan lagan, we have a masculine singular accusative there, and it means on account of or because of the word. So you'll need to keep in mind that these various prepositions can go with more than one case, and you need to know that the meaning of that preposition actually changes in translation depending upon what case it's with. Meta is another preposition that takes two cases. When meta is used with a genitive, it has the meaning of with. So here we have meta tone adelphone. Tone adelphone is a masculine singular genitive, and I would translate as with the brothers. But when you put meta with an accusative, then we have it comes up with the meaning of after. So meta tan apostolon being a masculine singular accusative, it means after the apostle. Hupo is another two-case preposition. Hupo with a genitive means by. Okay, so here we have hupo tone adelphone. By the brothers, or I've mistranslated there, by the apostles, but it's actually by the brothers. All right. Or if you put it with an accusative, hupo with an accusative means under, and it means hupo tan oikon means under the house. So again, you're going to go through all the various prepositions that you learned this week. Keep in mind that they work with either genitive, dative, or accusative. The nice thing about prepositions is you do not have to change any endings. Prepositions will look this way without actually going through all the various ending changes that the nouns do or the verbs do. Keep in mind, some only work with one case, others with two cases. You need to learn that so that you're aware of what they are. So when you do your translation, now, even though you're not going to be actually making any changes in the endings of the preposition, and these prepositions will always work with the various cases that you learn them with, sometimes the preposition will go through a slight change in spelling. Let me show you what I mean. Here we have the phrase εκ του οίκου, which means from the house. But the problem that you're going to run into, or not the problem, but the situation you're going to run into, is that sometimes ek will not be spelled epsilon kappa, it'll be spelled epsilon xi. And the reason is this. When a preposition precedes a vowel that has either a smooth or a rough breathing, the last consonant in there or the last vowel will either fall off or will change. And so in this case, because it's easier to say ex oikou rather than ek oikou, the Greeks would say ex oikou. It still only works with the genitive. It actually doesn't change anything about translation. It still means from a house, but it just makes it easier for pronunciation. All you need to keep in mind is that sometimes there will be some changes in spelling, and you just need to be aware of it and work with it. Others that will change is the preposition dia. Dia tu oikou, and remember, a dia with a genitive means through the house. But sometimes the dia will actually drop off that alpha on the end because of the noun that comes after it beginning with a vowel. And so here we do not simply have dia oikou, which is a little more difficult to pronounce when the Greeks were saying it, but it's just simply dioikou. Okay, it's just a matter of what is known as elision, that is sliding together the two sounds to form one sound. We do it in English quite frequently, more often subconsciously. The Greeks just simply took and adopted what they did in their speech into their writing. Another one that does this is apo. Apo tu oikou means from the house. But like dia, when apu comes before a noun that begins with a vowel, then the omicron will fall off, and you will end up with ap oikou. Instead of apa oikou, it's just simply ap oikou. And so that's what happens when you are putting these prepositions in front of nouns that begin with a vowel. If, however, that preposition comes before a vowel and a noun, and the initial vowel in that noun has a rough breathing sound, all right, like huios, for instance, the word for sun, then what happens is, take a look at this elision and change that happens. Apo not only drops the omicron, but the pi changes to a phi, and it becomes af. The hupo drops off the omicron, and the pi becomes a phi, and it becomes oof. And then finally, meta drops off the alpha, and the tau becomes a theta and becomes meth. Notice that there is sort of there's a little accent mark there. It's sort of like our at the end, like we do in English, to indicate that there's a vowel missing. The Greeks do the same way. But again, it doesn't change anything about translation. It doesn't change anything about what case it works with. It's just a matter of pronunciation that was brought in. Another thing you need to be aware of about prepositions is that sometimes they can be used to create compound verbs. Prepositions will be prefixed to a verb, and the form of the preposition may change slightly, as you've been seeing, but what it does is it helps to intensify the meaning of the verb, and not all prepositions are used to make compound verbs, so you need to be aware of that. But let's just give you an example of some of the ones that you may be running into. We have the preposition ek, which, although it normally goes only with the genitive, when it's put together with ekbalo, all right, with balo, it becomes ekbalo, and it doesn't no longer does balo simply mean I throw, but the preposition is now created a compound verb that means I throw out. Take ace and add it to erkamai, and it becomes ace erkamai, and it is I enter into or I come into, rather than just simply erkamai's I come. Apokrinomai, while krinomai simply means I judge, when you add apo to it, apokrinomai means I answer. This next one's interesting. Look at this. Sunago. Sunago means that I lead together. And then hoopago, all right, notice that the omicron falls off of that one and it becomes hoopago. We don't need it to say hoopa-ago, and it is I depart. So give yourself a chance, if you like, pause, look over the video. Keep in mind that the different prepositions are going to take different cases, and some are going to take more, and you need to know the basic meaning. Keep in mind, too, that some of them are going to change slightly in their spelling, but that does nothing about your translation. Also, the good news is, while you've been parsing nouns and verbs, you do not need to parse prepositions. All right, as we move out of prepositions today, let's take a look at the present middle passive. You remember Vera here, that Vera has several voices. You remember, you can see there coming out of her mouth are the electrical amps to remind us that Vera has 3 voices as a verb. It's either active, middle, or passive. Keep in mind that the active is when the voice is when the subject is actually performing the action. The passive is when the subject receives the action from another agent. But the middle is when the subject performs and receives the action. They are doing the action for him or herself. Now, up to this point in the course, you have only been dealing with the active voice. You've learned the present tense, and you've only been dealing with that. Today, I want to introduce you to the middle passive. On your screen there, you're going to see the beginnings of another paradigm, and we're going to use Lou's stem here, just like we have when we were looking at the present active voice. And you'll notice there that we have the same, we conjugate these verbs the same way we did the active. We begin with the stem, we take off that omega ending that you learned as a vocabulary word, and we just simply add the middle passive ending. It's luomai, lue, and then luetai. Now, when you look at the translation in the right-hand corner, I want you to notice that I give you 2 options. And that's because oh my, a, and a tie, these endings, can serve as both middle or passive. Luomai can mean either I loose for myself or I am being loosed. How will I know? This is going to just take a little bit of skill as you go through and you learn to translate and you pick up on the context. Quite often it's going to be passive, but there are a number of times when it's also going to be middle. And so only thing I can tell you that is that to best figure this out is practice, practice, practice. And you'll get a lot of that in this class. Lue, you loose for yourself in the middle, or you are being loosed. And then in the third person singular, luatai, is either he, she, or it looses for himself, herself, itself, or in the passive, she, he, or it is being loosed. Now in the plural, let's look at these endings we have here. We have luamatha, luestha, luontai. And it's the same thing that we saw in the singular. Luamatha is we loose for ourselves, okay, or it is luestha, you loose for yourselves, okay? Or luontai, they loose for themselves, or they are being loosed. So again, each time you go through, you're going to come up with a variety of ways that you're going to have to come up and translate these, figuring out on the context. Incidentally, at this point, so far as parsing goes, you've been doing P-A-I, meaning present, active, indicative. Now I'd like you to put P still for present because that's the only tense you know. But where you've had the active voice, I'd like you to put an M or a P indicating which one you are suggesting that it is. Or you may actually do both, M/P, so that you can demonstrate both translations. And we'll work on this again in class a bit. Now, you're going to learn all these endings, all right? One thing that you're going to want to look at here is Lou, and he is sitting on the indicator, okay? And he's looking here at this ring that has come down to him, Amethyst, all right, who is there, and she is untying a tie for Lou, and Lou goes, "Oh my, a tie," and Amethyst is the one untying it, okay? So you look at this in your book and you might find this to be a helpful way to remember. He's sitting on the indicator as Amethyst comes down to him and he says, "Oh my, a tie, Amethyst is the one untying," or Amethyst is the untie. Now I need to make a little note here about something known as deponent verbs. So far, most of the verbs that you have learned in this course all ended with an omega. Akuo, Lego, all right, blepo. All of these were verbs that you learned in the present active voice. Beginning this week, however, you were introduced to a series of verbs that actually came with what we're going to refer to as the omai endings. You learned verbs like erkamai, meaning I come, peruamai, I go, ginomai, I become or I happen, and then apokrinomai is I answer. Now, these are what are known as deponent verbs, okay? And the deponent verbs never show up with active voice endings. Those are your o, ace, a, amen, eta, usi endings. They will never take those endings. They always take middle passive endings. The omai, aetai, amatha, estha, untai endings that I just introduced to you. Verbs that you learn with the omai ending are known as deponent verbs, and they will always take middle passive. But here is the catch. Although they take middle passive endings, you will not translate them as middle passive. You will translate them as active. And this is going to take a little while to get your head around because I just introduced you to middle passive and you're so used to working with active, it's going to take a little while, but we'll work on it. But let me show you what I mean. Look at erkamai there. See how I've translated it? It's just simply translated as I come. Okay, and that's the way you would not translate it, even though it has a middle passive ending, as I come for myself or I am being coming, because of course that doesn't really make any sense. All right, that's why even though they take middle passive endings, we refer to them as deponent, and meaning that they lay aside the active voice, and it will always be as I come. Peruamai is I go. All right, and that would never be I go for myself. That might make sense, but I am being going, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to that in English, so you just translate it actively, I go. Same with ginomai, it would be I become. Or apokrinomai, although you could say I answer for myself, you would not say I am being answered. Okay? These verbs, when you learn them from your vocabulary list and your vocabulary card, and you learn them with an "oh my" ending, that is your clue that this is a deponent verb and that they will never ever take active voice endings. They will always take middle passive, but you will always translate them as deponent, that is active. When you parse these, and I'll give you some examples of these towards the end of this lesson, when you parse them, you're going to parse them present / D for deponent, all right, present, deponent, and then indicative third person singular. So, or however, so erkamai, for instance, would be present, deponent, indicative first person singular, as would be peruamai, ginomai, and apokrinomai. You don't want to put active, you don't want to put middle passive, just simply put D for deponent. And here is our little memory device. There is Vera Verb. She is in the boxing ring and she is looking at her opponent, help you remember deponent. and she's over there saying, "Oh my," because you can see her opponent has laid aside one of his gloves. He's laid aside his active voice, and he's only going to use his middle passive voice here. And so that'll be there to help you remember that that irkamai or deponent verbs lay aside the active voice. Another thing in the lesson for this week, this is a fairly easy one, but you learned it as a vocabulary word, but I do want to let you know. You learned the word oo. It also shows up as ook and ooks. It just simply means either no or not. But look at the way that it appears. These are not three different ways of saying no. There's no difference in their meaning. The reason for the spelling, just like the prepositions that you're learning this week, has to do with the noun or the word that is following it. If the oo or the negative particle is preceding a consonant, it'll simply show up as oo. If it is preceding a word that begins with a vowel that has a smooth breathing, it'll be ook. But if it's preceding a rough breathing word, a word with a rough breathing vowel on the front, it'll be ooks. It doesn't change the meaning at all. It's just a matter of spelling, again, for the purposes of pronunciation. All you need to do is just be aware of it. Nothing else changes. Let me give you some examples then of that. Here is oo with a word that begins with a consonant, luo. And in that case, it would be I do not loose. But when it comes before a word with a vowel, okay, but urkamai here has a smooth breathing. It's uk urkamai, I do not come. But then when we use hamartano, that has a rough breathing over its vowel, then we use the ooks version of the negative article, so it becomes ooks hamartano, I do not sin. All right, one more thing for this week, and then we will do a little bit of practicing. And that is we need to introduce you to Infant Ivy. Infant Ivy is here to help us learn the infinitive. Infant Ivy reminds us of the word infinitive, and an infinitive is a verbal noun. In English, we have lots of different uses of infinitives. We say things like to run, to sing, or to study. All right, and it actually the verb characteristics of tense and voice are here, but it also has some noun characteristics that you're going to learn later. At this point, what's most important for our purposes in this course, because we're going to deal with infinitives a lot more next term, is simply to learn the different endings for the present infinitive and how to translate it. So here are three new endings. I know you're more than happy to hear this, but here are three new endings and these are for the present infinitive. Using our stem lu, if we add the ending ain on the end, it becomes lu-ain. And we simply then translate lu here as to loose, or you could even say to destroy. And then in the middle voice, because infinitives also take middle and passive, although they both have the same one here, it's luesthai, to loose for oneself, or it could be in the passive voice, luesthai is to be loosed. Okay? At this point, I really don't expect you to be too worried about the infinitive. Just learn these endings, these two endings, ain and esthai, and know that you just simply need to put the word to on it. One thing to be aware of, however, is that, remember today we learned deponent verbs. And remember, deponent verbs will only ever take middle passive endings, even though it actually is an active voice. When that happens, the deponent verb will also take the middle passive infinitive. So here we go. Look at this. Esthai means to come. All right, doesn't mean to come for myself or to be coming. It just seems to come. And when you parse a infinitive, you simply do, as you see there on the screen, and I'll give you some more examples here maybe later, is a present, and in this case, deponent infinitive. If this was an active, for instance, if this was luain, I would say present active infinitive. Or if it was Lou esthai, I would say present middle passive infinitive. Okay? All right. And here is our memory device. You can see here is infant Ivy, and Lou is with infant Ivy. He's giving infant Ivy a present. Lou and infant Ivy are standing in the rain, which will help you to remember ain, and which is the active voice. And Lou is wearing an S-shaped tie, which will help you remember S tie. So you've got ain S tie, or rain and an S tie in the present tense, and with infant Ivy to help you remember that we're talking about infinitives. All right, let's just look at a couple of practice sentences here, or practice words. Looking at this first one, I want you to see how I'm translating and parsing it. We have ergamatha, comes from igero, which means I raise up. But now ergamatha, okay, is a present middle passive indicative first person plural, okay? And because it's middle passive, it means I can translate it one of two ways, okay? I can either translate it as we raise up for ourselves in the middle, or I could translate it as we are being raised up. Okay, and for this point in the class, as you're going through your practice exercises, I want you to translate it both ways so we can see that you're actually functioning with both the middle and the passive ending. So when you see a word like egeroamatha, you actually would translate it both as we raise up for ourselves and we are being raised up. Let's look at this next one. Sodzantai comes from sozo. When I look at that, and this is one thing that you'll find helpful, it's why it's important to maybe pronounce the words out loud. You know that sozo actually ends with an omega on the end, so it's not a deponent verb. And sodzantai, so it tells you it's middle passive. So it's present middle passive indicative third person plural. And we would translate this as either they are saving themselves, or for themselves, you could even say, that's in the middle, or in the passive, they are being saved. Let's look at the third one here. Daioke. Daioke comes from dioko, so again we know that this is not a deponent verb. So daioke tells me automatically that eta ending on the end there, knowing that my ending's from the middle passive, and I think through them, it's o, my, ea, tai, amatha, estha, untai. I know that it's the second person singular, o, my, a, so it's a present middle passive indicative, second person singular, and again, translating it one of both ways is either you pursue for yourself or you are being pursued. The fourth one here, paruomai. Now, here's one that we know from our vocabulary today, has the omai ending. It's a deponent verb, and you may remember, as you learn these, you might go, oh my, okay, this is deponent, all right? You might give yourself a little reminder there. So paruomai means it's deponent, which means although it takes a middle passive ending, you will still translate it with an active voice. So you parse it as a present deponent indicative first person singular, and it is simply I go. The last one here, apokrinomantha, comes from the word apokrinomai, another omai word from your vocabulary list today. So once again, this is a deponent verb, a verb that takes middle passive endings but is always translated actively. So we parse it present deponent indicative first person plural, coming from apokrinomai, meaning to I answer, and so here we just simply translate it as we answer. All right, for your class preparation, obviously, as always, learn the vocabulary for Chapter 4. Memorize the meaning of the infinitives with their respective cases. Remember, some go with one case, some go with two. Memorize your middle passive endings, your o, my, ea, tai, amatha, estha, untai. And then I'd like you to do at least 10 of the Chapter 4 practice sentences in the workbook. When you come to class, we will work together going through a review and making sure that we can answer any questions and reinforce the things in this lesson.